way I always start, with a call to the present moment. So take a deep breath. We're going to have some fun tonight. Now, I know that I'm the one standing between you and probably a late dinner or a glass of wine or seeing your loved ones at home. And I thought I had 90 minutes for this thing, but I'm not going to take 90 minutes because you have better things to do on a Friday night than listen to some crazy guy from California. However, if you stay till the end, the person who asks the coolest question will get a copy of Gear Up in Beta. And it's the coolest question, not the first or the last or the one that you think is coolest. Would you like to pick the coolest question? Okay. Okay, well, we'll have a discussion, but I take your advice. Okay, why did we do this? What is Gear Up and what is going on? How many of you have an idea for a new product or service that you'd like to launch? Hands up. Outstanding. How many of you don't have an idea for a new product or service yet, but you're kind of curious about how you take a new product to market? Hands up if you're in that category. How many of you don't give a rat's ass and you're just here because you have to be here? No, there's a bunch of you who haven't raised your hands, and you're almost as bad as the people from Korea who, when I ask the same sorts of questions, well, basically, it's like, if we raise our hands, something's going to happen. I think that there's something in the culture in Korea that causes them to be afraid to raise their hand. Let's try this again. Who's got an idea for a new product? Okay, anybody who doesn't have your hand up, meet one of those people right now. Introduce yourselves to each other because we're going to do something as we go through the slides where we stop from time to time and talk about how you'd apply this system to your products, okay? 2 minutes, meet each other. That would be to turn around and talk and shake hands. And if I see anybody writing notes or looking at their, doing their Crackberry stuff or fooling around with their iPhone, I'm going to personally strangle you. Introduce yourself to him. He's shy. Are you doing well? Do you know them? Yeah? Do you know him? A pleasure. Thank you. I'm glad you guys are talking. You're kind of shy. There's a really, really nice people that way or that way. You're supposed to be talking, guys. You're supposed to be talking. Do they know? You know him? You know him? Introduce each other.
I didn't hear what did you say.
So, do any of you have an idea for a new product? Do any of you have an idea for a new product?
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, yes, no?
Yeah.
So then talk together because we're going to do exercises as we go through. All right. Let's get started. I'm very lucky to have two brilliant co-authors. I'm not really the brains behind this book, but I've got two really cool people who are. The first is Lena Ramfeld. I first met her in 1997 when she moved to Silicon Valley, funded by Henry Wallenberg, who's one of the most amazing entrepreneurs in the world. And he gave her a bunch of money to come to Silicon Valley and compare the ecosystem there with the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Sweden. And Lena said, hey, Tom, let's build some bridges between Sweden and Stockholm, in fact, in Silicon Valley. And I said, sorry, I'm not interested. I'm headed to Singapore and after that to China. And she said, well, what if I tagged along? I said, well, you have to raise money and all that. And she goes, but I have funding. And I went, what? So we brought Swedes along on that first trip to Singapore, and we've been working together ever since. I consider Lena my business wife, and my wife Jill of 35 years loves Lena, so you don't have to worry. We're both happily married to two different people. But if you're lucky in your career, you're going to have someone you trust so much and enjoy working with so much that it will be like having a spouse. Now, if Lena's my business spouse, Jonas is the kind of bad boy that you like to come with you and do crazy things when you're out of town. How many of you use Skype? So Jonas is the guy who took Skype global. He was a senior sales and marketing executive at Skype, working directly with the founders, and he's the guy who took that thing around the world. He's amazing. He's tall, he's good looking, he's funny, And he'll come to Santiago if you invite him, so will Liena, and they're actually fantastic. So I hope at some point you'll have a chance to bring them here. So last year, Lena and Jonas said, hey, Tom, you know what, we're writing a book together. It's called Gear Up. And I said, we're doing what? I'm kind of busy. And they said, no, but a lot of the stuff in it is stuff you taught us. And so you have to be an author. And I said, well, and Jonas said, it's not going to be like those boring other business books. I'm dyslexic. And we knew that. So he can't read very well, and he hates long books. And I've made a living reading long, tedious books and finding the 3 exhibits that are interesting and putting them into PowerPoint presentations so I could teach entrepreneurs how to use the tools. But when Jonas said, what if we had a book, 9 gears, 10 chapters, 10 pages per chapter, half the pages have to have color graphics and no words on them. And I went, well, that sounds like a pretty interesting idea. And that's what we did. So what you're going to see are some of the slides that are some of the pages in the book. I hope you'll like it. Let's take just a quick overview of why these 9 gears are where they are. We're interested in helping people who've got an idea for a product that can either create a new market or completely disrupt an existing market. For example, well, no, we'll give you examples later. So part of it is this system that'll help you take an idea and turn it into a market-creating phenomenon. Part of it is that there will be digital books, and we may have a print-on-demand feature to this thing. The problem with books like this with the color pictures is they cost so much to print that most entrepreneurs won't pay what we'd have to charge them if we sell it through Amazon. But there will be an ebook for sure. There will be an Apple iPad version. There will be an Amazon Kindle version. And most of you would rather do that, I hope, than carry around an extra piece of paper anyway. We have, in addition, a digital toolkit. Think of it as a set of PowerPoint slides where you can actually work on your business related to the tools that we're talking about. We've got a growing elite cadre of black belts. These are people who know how to use this system and can teach others how to do it. Some of you in this room will become black belts. I don't know who, and I'm not begging you or asking you. I'm just saying if you get interested in this and you start to use it and you say, I want to teach other people how to use it, we'd like you to join the team. There are already lots of entrepreneurs from Vietnam to Shanghai to Singapore to Copenhagen to Stockholm to Silicon Valley who are using this system. And they're taking products to market and they really enjoy it. There are also a bunch of venture investors, including VCs and angels, who say this system reduces the chance of infant mortality for a new product. Most of you know big companies, 80% of the new products that big companies launch fail. Startups, the death rate is a lot higher. So what we want to do is reduce infant mortality. We want you to get your venture all the way to the 2nd year mark without dying. And the way to do that is to find paying customers, and that's what this book is all about, or the system's all about. There are also leaders in large global companies who are using it because, as you probably know if you've worked in a large global company, it's kind of hard to get innovation going in those places. But the partners at KKR, one of the world's largest leveraged buyout firms, all took the training because they want to teach the companies, the CEOs and other executives in the companies that they take private, how to take new products to market in a way that will create new markets and disrupt existing markets. Then finally, there are government leaders in Sweden, in Singapore, in China, Vietnam, who are using this system because they're trying to grow the local economies. And they know that if you can get young entrepreneurs in particular to create ventures that will scale and create a lot of employment without screwing up the environment, that's something that they want to see. And so it's amazing how interested the leaders of a number of provinces and cities in China are in using the system to try to get China to grow, because as we know with the world economy going into the tank, the Europeans aren't buying as much Chinese product as they used to, neither are the North Americans. And as a result, they're saying we've got to create companies that create products that people in China will want to buy and create jobs for people in China so that they can afford to buy the products. It's a very interesting way of thinking about how to grow an economy. That's the same thing. Sorry for the duplicates. The reason that happened is that we were going back and forth and we were trying to get this thing translated into Spanish for tomorrow. I won't go the whole list of the organizations that are already using it. Let's just say We know it's working. It's been used multiple times in most of these places, and they're having fun. And here we are. We're going to add, after tonight, Católica, because you will have had the experience of Europe, and we look forward to doing that. So what we're going to do is, I hope you've decided whose team you're on. If not, you'll be able to do it at the first time we do an exercise. But we're going to walk through the gears really fast, and every once in a while we'll stop and we'll do an exercise so you can work on your product. Normally, we would take anywhere from a half a day to 2 half days separated by 3 or 4 days to 7 days to run this thing so that you actually can get from an idea to products that you have prototyped and the ability to present to investors to see if they'll fund you. We don't have that time tonight, but I want you to think about how you would use this if you had more time. Again. All right, this is a game changer, and the goal is to teach all of you how to create blue markets and how to change the game of whatever product category you're in. The gear we start with is customers, as we should. And the question that you want to ask yourself is, if you rode a motorcycle, would you buy a motorcycle from someone who couldn't ride? And that's the source of this idea. If you can't ride with them, you're not going to be able to sell to them. No matter what the product category, the people who are going to buy a product that's important to them want somebody who knows about the product because they too have used it. They've experienced some of the frustrations in the product category. They really understand the customer's point of view. So this is the next generation Harley-Davidson baby motorcycle. It's cleverly designed so that the parents who are both working can both see where baby's going. If it's time to go out for a walk, you don't have to worry about whether the maid is there or the nanny's there or the babysitter's there. This puppy can self-motivate and get out there and get into traffic and avoid accidents and avoid predators. And it has the ability to have mom or dad talking to the little boy or girl in the thing. If the kid poops, it gets rid of the diapers and doesn't drop anything into the street. If the kid's hungry, it has breast milk if the mom wants to put that available, or it has some substitute, and so on, and so on, and so on. Now you look at this and you go, yeah, right. This is coming. In your lifetime, you will see a way for infants to get from place to place because their parents can't be with them in a vehicle that's safer than having a human doing the pushing. Because as we all know, humans make mistakes. They forget. They leave babies in cars with the windows rolled up and babies die in the heat. All sorts of terrible things happen. And so think of what you'd do if you were a mom or dad, what you'd want the person who is going to sell you this next generation machine to do. You'd want them to be parents probably, maybe with a child about your age or someone who's gone through that stage in life, and someone who really understands what your issues are. And if you're the baby, even though you can't quite articulate what your needs are, you want somebody to design something that works perfectly and is really cool. So if this is a baby, let's say if that's a baby girl, she wants to have the baby boys in their little motorized vehicles notice hers, but she also wants to be able to get away from them if they turn out to be obnoxious, right? And if it's a baby boy, he's just cruising for chicks. So he wants a really elegant thing so that he can, these were supposed to be jokes, but they're clearly not going over. Okay, but the other thing to think about this is, this guy, single, never married, never had kids, never ridden a motorcycle, never even pushed a baby carriage. You're gonna buy this vehicle from him? No way. You'll buy it from the young woman who's been a mom and who's actually spent time with parents. And I think probably most of you understand Steve Blank's model of customer development. How many of you have used the 4 bubbles and have sort of bought into the Steve Blank religion? Come on. No? Are you afraid to admit it, or you just haven't seen it yet? You will, for sure, if you work with Cristobal and my colleagues. Steve Blank's a genius. The 4 bubbles are great. The idea is, don't do product development in a vacuum. Get out of the building, talk to the customers, understand what their needs are, and then rapidly iterate your product in response to the things that they say as you show them prototypes. This idea is not new. IDEO has been doing this since they were founded in 1970. Cristobal has been doing it since he was a young man. Was it at IDEO and also at MIT, right? You've been doing it. So we used to call it user-centric design, then design. What are all the, come on, I can't remember all the things that we called it.
No, it was called before user-centered design. And
design thinking and all of that. By the way, this stuff is fabulous, and if you don't know how to do this, learn it, and here's a man who can teach you. There are probably other people in the community here as well. I don't think you should get out of the building and hang out with customers unless you can listen with your eyes. And the skills that you learn by doing what Cristobal knows how to do very well are essential to the process. So you can't read the fine print, but the basic idea is similar to what Steve Blank says. You get out, you talk to them, you find out what their concerns are, but not just by asking a bunch of questions, by watching and asking smart questions until you really understand not only what hurts, why does it hurt, when does it hurt, how bad is the pain, and what are they willing to do to stop the pain. Compare this with the way that most automobile companies design cars. Now, this is a fake story, but it's actually resembles true life in many ways. A salesman's out talking to customers. Customer here in Santiago needs to have a new car to get through traffic and get to work. And the customer describes something that, if you were listening carefully, would look something like that. It's got 4 doors, it's got room for passengers, it's got room for other things. But the salesperson loves sports cars. Another one of these single guys, never married, never, right? And so he goes back and he says to the designers, they want one of these. The designer doesn't know what a sports car is really like. They don't have the money to afford one of those things. They don't make sales commissions, so they design something that looks like a lunar rover. They take it to the manufacturing people, and the VP of manufacturing says, we need something that's easy to manufacture, designed for manufacture, designed for repair, designed for da-da-da-da. So it gets a little closer to what the original design was, or the customer need was, but they spent so much time they have to price it like a Rolls Royce. And the customer says, thanks, I'll keep riding my bike. But the problem is, if you try to get to work on a bicycle in Santiago or anywhere else, you've got problems. The pain is not over. So you need a better solution, and that would involve getting out with customers, understanding, being with them, riding with them, if you will, and listening with your eyes. So take 3 minutes in your teams talking about the product and identify who are the customers who are going to use this product or service and what is their pain. Okay? 3 minutes.
You need anything?
I'm going to go as fast as I can. I think.
Okay. Take your time. It's no problem.
No, but
all the people are happy with
but
here.
I know some of them will have to leave, for good reasons.
I don't want to pressure you to do something that you want to do.
No.
Okay?
No,
Take
I'm-
your time.
Okay. If you're going to text,
What?
take.
But my group is, I'm talking with my group.
You're talking with your group about the
Because
product?
I am alone, my group is not here.
Okay, but you could also talk to them. But if you're really talking with your group about your product, we're good. I thought you were doing what other people do when they're fooling around on that. That's fine. Use that mechanism. It's fine. Do you believe him? Do you think he's talking to his group, or is he talking to his girlfriend?
Probably his. She's telling him to get back home.
Don't be so self-righteous, man. Life is fine. Now, normally we take about 15 minutes to do this, but I don't want you to stay here as long as we'd have to stay to take 15 minutes because we all need to get dinner and hopefully to have some fun. So you're starting to get an idea about what the pain is. I want you to think about, when you go out to talk to customers, to think about some different kinds of customers. Have any of you learned about the technology adoption life cycle? Jeffrey Moore wrote about it. Anybody, those of you who are familiar, let me know. Many of you have not, so let me explain this. What this is measuring is the percent of the customers who will buy your product or buy in the product category for the first time. So if it were this new kind of baby carriage, so it's the axis is time. This was created by Everett Rogers in 1963, and Jeff Moore realized that when you have a disruptive innovation, it doesn't work the way it should. So out here, the first 2.5% of people who adopt just do it because they're kind of crazy. They do it because they like new things, and they don't know anybody else who's done it. They just do it. They often don't pay very much, but they can be helpful to you because they're often technical, and if your product has any sort of technology about it, they'll be helpful. But they want it for free or very cheap. This group is the interesting group. The next 12.5% of the adopters want to use this innovation to set themselves apart. If it's a company, they want to dominate the competition. If it's an individual, so teenagers that are fashion trendsetters, a trendsetter wants to be able to set the new trend, to be there to get there first with whatever it is. You know, the guys who first started to wear their trousers down so you could see their underwear, the people who did that first are the visionaries, and the rest of you guys who followed somebody to do it are the pragmatists. Now, the visionaries do it because they want to be out front, they want to gain pioneering advantage, and they're willing to take a risk, and they're willing to pay. And they're willing to take a product that doesn't work perfectly the first time because they like innovating. This next group, the early majority, is the next 35% of people who will adopt. Completely different psychology. If it's in a company, they don't want to lose their job. They don't like change because most of the time when you, especially if it's really disruptive change, things go wrong, people get angry, and if they are involved with initiating it, they could get fired or they could get into lots of trouble. So their basic idea is, we're not adopting anything until it's pretty bulletproof. And we don't trust these guys because they're not like us. So imagine that these are like lions on the prowl. They're quite happy to go out and do things. These are like a herd of gazelles. And so what early majority do is they'll ask, they'll say, are you ready to do this sort of next generation baby carriage? And you go, no, me neither. How about you ready? No, me neither. But then when people start saying, I'm thinking I'm going to go down and check it out, do a test drive, and see if my little one will do it, when 2 or 3 or 4 of your colleagues start that you know are pragmatists just like you start to say, you say, well, why don't we, if we all do it together, you know, we can figure out how to do this and we'll learn together and we'll make sure, and then if there are a lot of us who can really hold the company accountable and make sure the quality is really good, and suddenly you see this, right? And that's what is called a tornado, a very fast acceleration of the group, of the purchasing, because the early majority travels in packs and they buy in large packs, and for very good reasons. Once you hit the halfway point, the next 35% of what we call late majority, these are people that really just hate innovation. And they'll do it if they have to, but it's got to be cheap and it's got to be bulletproof. So you're going to have to figure out a version of the product at some point that you can price much lower in order to get them as customers. The last 15% are laggards. We don't even have them here. They're never going to buy. Never, ever. But they'll give you all the reasons why they won't. And those are very good things to listen to because you can then find out what the possible side effects are that you could then design out of the product to keep it from being, to make it less risky for the early majority who are very risk averse. Okay, so each of those types of customers is very useful to you, but you're gonna, when you go out and talk to customers or watch them and do this design thinking, you've got to realize that depending on which of these psychographic categories the customers are in, they're going to respond in very different ways. So it's useful to think about designing a product for the innovators, but in parallel, think about what is that product going to look like when we do it for the pragmatist or the early majority. And this is where all of the things that have to do with agile product development and all that are really excellent. But in addition to agile product development for the generation that you're doing, you ought to be thinking very clearly about the development of the product that is the next generation. Often in technology companies, they'll actually have 2 generations of product in development at the same time, and they do it partly for this reason. So as you take your new ventures and your ideas to market, be thinking about what does this version look like? It's probably much more expensive, a bit complicated, but it has all the bells and whistles. This thing is simple, idiot-proof, safe, reliable, and not quite as expensive as this, but it's more expensive than what you're going to have to design for the late majority. Fair enough. So nobody buys anything and stays loyal unless you really cure the pain, and in addition to that, unless you really delight them. And you don't delight anybody unless you solve a problem in a way that no one else has thought of. Steve Jobs is sort of the champion of delight. How many of you have an Apple product of one kind or another? And how many of you would, if you could get a Dell a little bit lower price or get a Samsung a little bit lower price, would immediately switch from Apple to another vendor? For you, a small minority. And you may have had some problems with your Apple devices. I've had some with my MacBook Pro, which have made me a little less loyal than I used to be. But here's the point. How many of you have been stuck in traffic? What if your car could fly? What if you could literally hit a button, the car sprouts wings, elevates gently, kind of like hovercraft. And by the way, it's all part of a big system, so if you've got a bunch of flying cars on the same street, they're going at different altitudes so that you don't wind up with a traffic jam 3 stories up. And this car has been tested by the Federal Aviation Administration and all these other things. It's safer than planes and helicopters and safer than automobiles. So that it's not going to drop out of the sky. It uses no gasoline. It uses solar power when it's out there flying around. And if you don't have enough sun, you plug it in to your regular electric outlet at home, and it charges in 2 hours overnight while you're sleeping. And you can do it at the office if you have to do it there. How many of you would go for a test drive? You are the visionaries. How many of you are going to wait a while and see how many visionaries fall out of the sky before you go for a test drive, right? Okay, point well made. Now, keeping with the same example, cars, they have to get us from here to there. That's basic functionality. You want them to do it reliably. It may not just be transportation, it may be storage for whatever you have to carry. If you golf, you have to be able to get your golf clubs in the back. If you have children, it has to be able to fit the appropriate number of baby seats and so on. If you like to go to the beach and you want to take your bicycles with you to the beach, it's got to be able to accommodate all that. If you're a real estate person and you want to take clients out in some elegant style, it's got to have a back seat that isn't terrible, right? And so you get the idea. Depending on what you're going to use the car for, it will have different sorts of functions, but that's what you're buying. You're buying different jobs that need to get done. Efficiency is all about it doesn't use as much gas, or maybe it is electric, so it doesn't use gas at all. And it doesn't waste my time because it doesn't break down so much. And it's sort of a really easy to own and operate vehicle. Great value. That's what efficiency is about. This is table stakes. Nobody in the car industry does very well if they don't do these things reasonably well. But in this flying car example, you create a delight divide, because the people who really don't want to be stuck in traffic anymore and willing to pay to learn how to have a flying car will be so happy that they're not going to go back, especially if they're worried about the environment and this thing's no gasoline consumption and all that. There are a lot of reasons that people would, once they bought it and found that it works very well, would just never go back. And that's what you want to be thinking about for your innovation. You've got to find something that is painful enough that customers will try it, even if it's a little crazy at first. And if you do it well and you really cure the pain, if you will, if you solve their problem, if you get the job done that couldn't be done otherwise, they will be loyal. Not forever, because you've got to keep doing this. This delight business is not a one-time thing. It has to be happening again and again and again. 3 minutes. What's your delight? Same teams, talk about, you know about the pain, so let's talk about how you're going to delight those customers. Let's go. 3 minutes.
Partners for Jam Chile. They were stuck in traffic and they didn't have the new car.
I'm genuflecting in front of you and saying thank you. Thank you very much.
That's the Chinese way. You know that? Yes, because we look at it. It's the Chinese way.
Also Japanese. Also Japanese.
Chile, you can do it like
I know it. I've been noticing. So it's easier that way. You can both get.
Do you know Colombian.
No, I don't.
No?
No, I do not.
It's a leader in financial areas, bank, insurance, pension. funds. Yeah.
The reason
And
I don't know any
Claro.
I don't know anything at all about Colombia.
Estoy mandando la
Have you been in South America, Colombia, or Mexico? Do
This
you know?
week is the first time I've ever been anywhere south of the Rio Grande, except twice I went to Mexico on vacation. I love Chile, and I'm not going to most of those
You
other
love
places.
Chile?
I love Chile,
Yes.
and I'm not going to Colombia, and I'm not going to Venezuela, and I'm going
You
because I
said
only have so many.
Estratégica.
Listen to me. I only have so many weeks a year that I can be on the U.S. 18 to be exact.
18?
18, and the weeks that I'm going to be in Latin America, I'm going to be in one country.
In Santiago.
Well, or up north, right?
Yes.
Up north. I'm saying when I come to Latin America, I'm coming to, she said Santiago, I said, well, Chile, because I'm
Chile,
here, but
yes.
also,
He loved the north, so we're coming back and taking
And I'm
San
go-
Pedro.
San Pedro de Atacama.
We were in Antofagasta.
and I'm going to
Antofagasta.
Concepcion tomorrow, so we'll see.
He's going to Antofagasta.
Concepción is very special.
So, I love
You heard about the earthquake in Concepción 2 years ago? Yes. You can see in some buildings, actually.
But I hope, I mean no disrespect when I talk about the fact that I'm not going to go to these other places. If you have time, I'd love to talk to you about how I pick where I go. It wouldn't take very long. I can show you, and then you'll understand. I hope that you both want to go to some of the places.
You
that I
are
wanna
okay
go.
with the time?
Okay. 3 minutes. All right, 3 minutes. I know you're not there yet. 99% of you can't figure out delight in 3 minutes, but you're on the way there. So what I'd encourage you to do is work this with your teams over the next couple of days and keep working on delight. But you've then got to go out and talk to customers and say, how about it, right? Okay. You're not going to get anywhere, right, doing that. I love it. You guys really get it. I was saying to the group I talked to this morning, and I have the same experience here. You know, I've only been in Chile since last Sunday, and I've never been to Latin America before Sunday. And I've never been in any country that has so many smart, good-looking people in one place. I mean, if you've been to North America, how many of you have been to Silicon Valley or any place in the U.S., right? There are a lot of ugly people in the U.S., me included. But I mean, come on. I don't know how you guys do it. I think having brains and sort of good looks in both genders is sort of a competitive advantage. It's a national competitive advantage you should use in some way. I don't know. I think you and Sweden are probably at the top of the pecking order in this. So we're going to do another product category. Imagine you're penguins. You like to eat fish, and sharks like to eat you. So we have a new product called Shark Sonar. You put it on, you go swimming looking for your lunch, and if there's a shark within 100 miles, beep, 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 you know the shark's there. So you have enough time to go ahead and grab the fish, get back on the little iceberg and go wave at the shark as he swims by, still very hungry. Shark Sonar would delight penguins. But if they're sitting there all, on their little iceberg saying, yeah, this is wonderful, but they're not telling other penguins, you have a problem if you're the people who made up, designed Shark Sonar. You've got to get your delighted customers to start telling their stories. We call it friction-free storytelling because lots of stories are hard to tell. It may be too complicated. It may be kind of socially unacceptable. It may be boring, And so what you do is you go out and talk to the customers that you have, and some of them will be very articulate, very engaging. They'll tell why they love the product in a way that you go, can I catch that on video? And you catch it on video, and you may do some post-production editing so that you can make them look even more amazing than they are as they rave about the product and why they love it. And then you have on YouTube your customer channel. And then you have your customers that are delighted with your product doing crazy things so that you have videos that are really viral, not just them saying, I love the product. And you get people to come to that YouTube channel, and then they start sharing it with their friends on Facebook and tweeting about it and doing Pinterest stuff on it, and you get the idea. What entrepreneurs need to do, and I'm sure you're aware of it and you're probably doing it, is use social media to turn your customers into salespeople. You should never, never have to spend the amount of money in marketing and advertising that we used to spend before 2005. 7 years ago, there was no Facebook. There was no Twitter. YouTube had just gotten launched. You're living in a golden age for entrepreneurs because marketing is the expensive part, or used to be, and if you're creative and you learn how to use the social media and have your customers do the storytelling for you, right? You'll find a customer that tells a story about shark sonar that all the other little penguins can repeat to everybody else, and soon you've got shark sonar on 80% of the penguins, and the other 20% are somebody's lunch. Okay, so we talked about delight. Let's talk about customer acquisition. Steve Blank calls this customer creation. It's his third bubble. It's when they say, okay, I'll pay you. Any of you who have had to sell anything for a living, I learned this lesson when I was selling tickets to, I was in a Catholic school and we would have like a carnival and I'd go door to door and I'd knock on 100 and 10 would answer and say, what do you want? And one would say, okay, kid, give me the raffle tickets, right? Very, very embarrassing. And many of you have had this sort of experience. Some of you are professional people in sales and you know, even if you get really good at this, you get a lot of rejection, especially with something new. So the first part of frequency is if you're going to get a lot of customers, you've got to increase the number of potential customers that you contact. But if, in fact, you can only get a 1%, you're going to have to make an awful lot of cold calls in order to have any sort of interesting business. What I'd suggest, in addition to calling on lots of people, is looking at the buying process, looking at how you interact with customers, and look at all the ways that you actually prevent them from buying. I think all of us can probably think of an example where we've planned to go and buy something in a store and been so angry at the stupid salesperson that we've walked out. Has that ever happened? I know it's happened with me buying cars and buying clothes, and it happens with my wife Jill, who's a very smart shopper, and she leaves stores probably half the time because the salesperson is either stupid or too pushy or whatever. And it's not just the salespeople. Sometimes it's around trying to figure out whether you can use your credit card or not, or you're on the website and the thing's so darn confusing that you can't figure out how to get the information in and you leave an empty shopping cart. So as entrepreneurs, design really good buying and selling processes, because if you can turn this from 1 out of 100 to 10 out of 100, it's all profit. It's all profit. And not very many entrepreneurs think about this part of it. If you are smart about this, you will have more efficiency, if you will, so that the calls that you make are more likely to convert into paying customers. I always get a little worried when I show this one. This was Jonas Kjellberg's idea, but he says, Tom, tell them we're not shooting customers, we're taking aim and really understanding who the right ones are. So it's all about the sight, it's not about the fact that we've got a Gatling gun here. The metaphor is you've got to get out and see a lot of people fast. And in addition, you've got to see people more than once. Think about the, think about, this should work. Yeah, there we go. I'm going backwards? Hold on just a second here. This is what I want. Think about how many times you actually go when you're buying a car, for example. Do you go only once and buy it, or do you go to different showrooms and you think about it and you look online? It's a process that takes some time. So if you're the person doing the selling and the customer needs to take some time, if you have to interact with that customer 8 or 10 times, if all you do is say, hey, you ready to buy my product yet? Ready? You ready? By the third time, they're going, I'm out of here. What you need to do is understand the customer as a person. Do they have pets? If so, are they dogs or cats or fish? Because it depends. I mean, if they're cat lovers, you don't want to be telling them about your German Shepherd and how much you love dogs. If they have children, find out how old they are and what the challenges are that they're facing raising the kids. If they've got parents, find out if they're in nursing homes, find out if one of them's sick. Find out about them as people. In terms of their profession, learn enough about what they're doing to understand the challenges that they face on the job. And then, when you reach out to them, it's not always, hey, are you ready? It's, I know you love kitties, and I saw this really interesting article about training cats to do whatever it is, to live peacefully together. Or, I know that you're trying to get your child into this very important preschool, and there was something on how to do that I thought you might be interested in. I'm not sure if you've seen it or not. What you're doing is treating that customer like someone that you trust and care about. And when you do that while selling, when they buy, they don't feel like they're buying from a salesperson. They feel like they're adopting something they really want and need from somebody they trust, somebody who understands them, and somebody they know that they can come back to if they have any issues. And that's the way that you make the delight, not just about the product, but about the whole experience of working with you and your company and the people in it. So make sure that the delight is all of the above. So we've got customer acquisition, delight. Now we're going to talk about making money. That would be business model. A business model is just a way to turn great ideas into cash. Now to do that, you need to be able to think systematically about what am I paying for, who's doing what does it cost, where are the biggest costs. If I look at my income statement and my balance sheet, where are the large numbers? And what if I could turn some of those large numbers into zeros? Let's use Amazon.com as an example. Remember in the good old days when bookstores were places you went and there was a physical store and there was inventory, well, there were a lot of things going on. What were the big costs of a traditional bookseller, a retailer? The real estate's huge, especially if you want to have a really nice bookstore in downtown Santiago or something like that, or in a really cool mall. Unbelievably expensive real estate. What else? What else? What are they spending their money on?
Taxes. Here in Chile, taxes. A lot of taxes.
Tax. And do you have to pay tax on Amazon when you buy it from there? No. Isn't that interesting? That Amazon in California is going crazy trying to make us in California pay the sales tax. So tax is a big deal. But the customers are sort of paying that, right? I mean, they pay you, but it's important. So you've got tax, you've got real estate, what else? Absolutely, you've got all these salespeople you're paying, and frankly, a lot of them aren't very good. A lot of them are annoying customers. The customer comes in and says, I'm looking for a book by this author, this title. Salesperson goes, I don't know. Go look in the business book section. I don't know. Or, so salespeople, you're paying them a lot of money and they're not necessarily doing you any good. What else? Big cost. I can't see. Time for the customers. But what about for the people who are selling the books? What are their costs? So if you're spending a lot of time shopping as a customer, that's your cost, not mine if I'm a retailer, right? In fact, the more time you spend in my store, the better, because you'll probably buy more stuff if you're a bookaholic, like many of us are. So it's good to be thinking about it from the customer perspective, but if you're in the business of selling books to people like us, what are your costs? One more big item. Books, inventory. Because half the time somebody comes in and says, I'd like a copy of Blue Ocean Strategy, have you got one? No, but I can order it and get it for you in 2 weeks. Shit. So the person leaves, doesn't want to wait 2 weeks, and goes, and now they just go to Amazon.com, but in the old days they'd find a bookseller that had it. And then we all remember the book sales, right? At the end of the year, they'd be selling all of these ridiculous titles for 10 cents on the dollar. So inventory, and salespeople, and real estate. And Amazon said, you know what? No retail stores, no salespeople, no point of purchase terminals, no inventory. In fact, in the early days, you'd get online, and you all may remember, I don't know if you know that this is how it worked. You'd find the book, and Amazon would say, thanks very much, give me your credit card. They'd get your money, and after they had your money, after they were sure they had it, they'd contact the publisher and say, hey, Kosnik wants a copy of whatever. So they not only had no inventory, but they had cash. They had this amazing source of working capital by customers paying them in advance for books that they didn't own. Now, Amazon, they have to carry some inventory, but compared to regular bookstores, it's nothing like that. So that's the idea. Zeros where other people have high costs. Whatever your product category is, think about how to do that. And this is the next part of this. And how many of you have seen the business model canvas? In almost all of us, I want all of you to learn how to use this. I'm not going to be able to teach you how to use it tonight. Cristobal, I know, if you work with him, he has a fantastic program. Steve Blank loves this. I love it. The venture capitalists in Silicon Valley love it. It's just the people at Clean Tech Open love it. It's so simple. It's a way for you to communicate to investors and to your employees and to the leadership team and the board your assumptions about things before you know whether they're true. So you say, we think our target customer segments for this flying car are working men and women between the ages of 25 and 45 for earning more than so many a year. Some of them have actually gone skydiving on vacation. Some of them have their pilot's license anyway, and so on and so on. So you develop a persona or profile of who some of the early adopters are going to be. And our value proposition in the flying car will be the fact that it is safe, it elevates, it actually, the no gasoline is a big part of it, and that's going to be important to 20% of that group, but not all of them. You've got all these assumptions, and we're going to ship the flying cars by this kind of distribution. We're going to interact with customers in some really classy retail locations, plus we'll have online relationships and communities. We're going to charge 10% above whatever, and we're not going to discount. And the cost to actually build the car is going to be this much variable, this much fixed. And the partners that we're going to have, because we're not going to do the flying car all by ourselves, we're going to actually go to people who make helicopters and planes and stuff and have them help us with it. And the key activities are, and the key resources are, and so on and so on. You make your best guess. You have a hypothesis you test if you want to get sort of academic about it, or you make your best guess, which is what entrepreneurs know they're doing. Then you get out and you test those ideas, those assumptions, those guesses by interacting with customers and the people who are going to be your partners, and you figure out whether they really will pay 10% more, or whether you're going to have to discount, or whether it matters if they have skydived in the past, and so on. Make sense? So when you use the business model canvas, make it a point. What Steve Blank does in his class at Stanford is every week they take one of the areas of the canvas and they get out and they really focus on it. And they clear up all the confusion. They've got that one done. Okay, we've got target segment. We understand value proposition. Now let's go figure out partners. And in 9 weeks, you can go from, I got a rough idea of what might be going on, to I know what's going on in terms of my business model. It's so efficient and it's really empowering. So I encourage you to use it as all of my, not only my students, but the entrepreneurs that I work with are all using as well. So now that we've done the magic 3, it's time to move on and think about partners a little bit. Who loves you and who hates you? Because sometimes you think you're getting a box of chocolates, but instead you've got a bomb or a hand grenade. I'm going to use the example of Skype. Jonas loves to tell this story because he was so amazed that he hadn't figured this out ahead of time. So the founders of Skype and Jonas said, to really accelerate adoption, we need to get the people who are making smartphones to have Skype on the smartphone. So that would be Nokia, Samsung, Sony, Ericsson, the usual suspects. And since they already knew the guys at, I can't believe, Finland, Nokia, they knew the people at Nokia pretty well. And so they came to visit them and said, look, we've got this idea, you could be the first. Nokia talked to them for the better part of a year, saying, yeah, probably. The night before they were going to announce a partnership at this large mobile show that goes on in Munich every year, Nokia backed out and left Jonas and his colleagues sort of egg on face in front of the crowd. Why did Nokia back out? That's right. Nokia's key business partners are telecommunications companies, and Skype was taking the most profitable part of the carrier's business and basically turning it into, instead of profits, losses, or certainly falling profits. So in order to do this properly, you need to not only understand your business model, but your partner's business model, and who your other partners are, and what their business models are. Because if you actually understand that in advance, you're going to be much less likely to make the mistake that Skype did. Now, it turns out, and Jonas is very happy that this turned out to be true, the companies that make the little headsets that you use when you're talking on the computer, Logitech is the largest of them, I think, they love the idea. So Logitech was saying, we've got presence in all these retailers and people like the Logitech brand, and we're going to partner with you. Logitech was amazing. Why? Because there was no conflict. Logitech sells devices that you use with laptop computers in the day, and it was kind of like, okay. And it also turns out that retail stores that served, let's say, people who might be your grandparents' age, or I'm not your grandparents' age for many of you, but so people 60 and above. Retailers that catered to that crowd really liked it too. And they went out of their way to have places like at the grocery store or at the, think of something like a Walmart or something like that, where people could learn about Skype, sign up for it, and so on. Very unlikely assumption. It's not an assumption I would have made, but it turned out that it's something they discovered when they went out into the market. The next thing to think about is, if you're going to have a partner, and you can really help that partner to defeat its competition in the war for its customers, then you become what we call the ammo of love, or in Spanish, munición de amor, I think is probably how you pronounce that. The English version of this I accidentally deleted instead of the Spanish version. This thing's partly translated, and we didn't want to give you half a translation tonight. So there are four kinds of partners. You organize them on two axes. One is how much revenue and profit will those partners bring you in the next 2 years? And the other is, what is their ability as you rapidly generate the next generation of product that they